I didn't think I would be this way as a mom. I didn't want to be this way as a mom, but I'm coming to understand that this environment isn't necessarily suitable for the needs that I have, and I'm actively in the process of figuring out what to do about that.
Welcome to Worthy Mother Podcast. I'm your host, Emily Hardy, a mom of two on a mission to help moms everywhere feel less alone. This is not a parenting podcast. Instead, it's a space for pushing back against societal expectations of perfection and embracing self-compassion in your motherhood journey. Let's get into it. Welcome to Worthy Mother Podcast. Today we are going to be tackling quite a big topic, and that is really just the additional factors to motherhood that can add to the complexity of the experience we may be having. And joining us for this conversation is Amanda Losch. She is a complex trauma therapist, and she is also a neurodivergent and medically complex mom, and has a lot to bring to the table for this conversation. I'm really pumped to have this conversation with you, Amanda. Can you just go ahead and start out by laying out your story, who you are, and maybe kind of what you do both as a therapist and then a little bit as a mom too?
Sure. I'm also so excited to be here, so thank you for having me. As you mentioned, I have been a complex trauma therapist for the past 10 years, and I recently sort of switched out of that more towards caregiving. My family, as you mentioned, we're neurodivergent and medically complex, so there's a lot going on there. And then also transitioning my business to provide self-care, education, and community events for parents of neurodivergent kids. So we'll talk about later, there's a real lack of support for those navigating complexity in their journeys. I have two kids. One is 4 and one is 2. And I live with them and my husband and our cute little Chiweenie dog in the suburbs of Chicago. And I would say about 2 or 3 years ago, our family started really navigating, understanding and supporting our different neurotypes and how all of that contributes to the ecosystem of our family. And so my professional life has also followed suit. Still do a lot of work with complex trauma and a lot of learning about complex trauma, but educating ourselves about neurodivergence and medical complexity has truly come to the forefront for us.
I think it's really cool when we look at how our experiences in life, and motherhood in particular, just the complexities of what we navigate in that experience, how it can impact our professions and what we bring to the table when it comes to like helping and supporting other people. And when I came across your Instagram, I think I followed you, and then 1 or 2 days later was like, I have to have you on the podcast. It just comes across so clearly that you're bringing this wealth of experience and like things that you've learned from life alongside your education to really make a difference for people in
thank you
coming
so
across
much.
your content and taking it in. So you're doing a great job out there.
Thank you. That means a lot. And that's like a piece that I've really enjoyed is pairing my professional and educational background with my lived experience. And like you said, allowing them to inform each other. And the feedback that I've got so far is that the vulnerability piece or the transparency piece has been really important for other people to see their realities reflected back to them in that way. So that's really, it's meaningful to hear that that's coming through, and hopefully I can continue to provide that space for folks.
Yeah. So I'd love to know a little bit about your late diagnosis with neurodivergence. I was diagnosed with ADHD, I think it was almost 2 years ago now.
Okay.
And it's been a journey to like figure out like, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for my family? And, you know, I'm still very early in the process of like learning how to kind of adapt my life with that diagnosis. But I would just love to hear from you, like what the process looked like of receiving a diagnosis, and then how it has shaped the way you see yourself and maybe the way you parent as well.
Yeah. So I am yes and no late diagnosed. So I think like let's first start by maybe defining neurodivergence a bit, because for me as an adolescent, I was diagnosed like depression, anxiety, and ADHD. And those are all things that fall under the neurodivergent umbrella. However, I feel like a lot of times people hear neurodivergence, they think mostly autism and ADHD. So I had sort of this mashup of diagnoses as a young person And that really contributed to my understanding of self as I moved into adulthood. But for me, there always felt like this piece that I was asking questions about, and I didn't really understand in the back of my mind. So, how this all came to a head, when I was pregnant with my daughter, my youngest, I noticed that every time I'm pregnant, I tend to get increase in depression and anxiety during pregnancy. I don't so much struggle with postpartum, but the during has been super rough. And to be honest, I didn't really know that was a thing. So just wanted to put it out there. So I was wanting to be proactive and I scheduled a appointment with a psychiatrist to talk about medication management during pregnancy, which at the time I was also getting my perinatal mental health certification and learning that actually it can be a greater risk to the pregnancy to have untreated mental health issues versus some of the medication. So I just want to put it out there that that should always be a nuanced conversation with your provider. And if your provider is not open to that, to if you're able to find a provider who is. So luckily I met with her and she did something really important, which is to look at all these diagnoses, mental health, and then also my physical health diagnoses, and put them all together and get a clearer picture of what was happening. So I remember her starting the conversation, and as a clinician, I'm sort of tracking in my mind, like, she's asking me a lot of questions about autism, like, so much so that we're halfway through the session. She hasn't even asked me about, like, what I'm struggling with yet. We're running out of time. And then we got to the end of the session and she was like, I wonder, have you ever considered that you might be on the autism spectrum? And a couple of things happened for me in that moment. One, that part of me I mentioned before that was always wondering and asking questions and feeling like things didn't add up for me felt relieved and supported. And also, I sort of had a identity crisis because I didn't have a nuanced understanding of autism. I had basically a stereotypical understanding and I asked myself all of these different questions and it became overwhelming to me while I was experiencing, these increased mental health symptoms in pregnancy and dealing with what was the emergence of some of the like behavior challenges that came with the neurodivergence of my first child. So I met with another psych provider to get a second opinion. She said something really helpful to me. She's like, "You're pregnant. Your depression and anxiety is unmanaged. Let's get that under control. Let's have this baby. Let's get through postpartum. And then when your hormones have evened out and you're feeling like everything is well managed, let's get you assessed." And that was really what my nervous system needed to hear to be able to take it step by step and not overwhelm myself. So that's what we did. And like I had mentioned, this was sort of co-occurring at the time that my oldest was turning 2, and we're beginning to see some things. An occupational therapist had actually recommended that he get a autism assessment as well. So we kind of went through that process together and ended up getting diagnosed a couple of weeks apart. So I was diagnosed with autism level 1 and he was diagnosed with autism level 2. And then as an identity moving forward, I identify as ADHD and, he'll get to choose whatever he would like to sort of identify with or not identify with as he moves forward. So it was a bit of a wild ride, but I feel grateful that that first clinician had the awareness to look at this constellation of different pieces and really put them together in a way that nobody else had. And I feel very grateful to the second provider for making space for me to break that down and enter that as I was ready.
Yeah, it's an interesting time we're living in right now where
Oh, yeah.
I think in a lot of ways it's like, oh my goodness, we have so far to go in the way we talk about different diagnoses and the stigma and just the understanding that clinicians have in the way that they're able to bring
Right.
that forward. But
Right.
I also see stories similar to yours pretty consistently where people have kids and end up,
Yeah.
their kids are diagnosed with some form of neurodivergence. And
Yep.
simultaneously, mom or dad is figuring out, oh, maybe
Yeah,
this is a
that's
genetic
familiar,
thing. We're like, oh, that's a sign of
right?
autism? I thought that's just how we were. Like,
I
it's,
thought that's just how my
yeah.
family works.
When you hear those stories, it does show in some ways like how far we have come as a
Yeah.
society in understanding these diagnoses and, just like there is the support out there. And I think it is cool to see how motherhood can be the catalyst for that for a lot of individuals. I
Yeah.
know what I know about ADHD, a lot of women end up being diagnosed after becoming mothers because it's a whole new,
Right.
just like it's just so much more is added to your plate as a mom, and
Exactly.
the symptoms come up in such a different way that's a lot harder to mask. But it's neat to see how the experience of becoming a mom can actually benefit the mom in so many ways because these things become more apparent and there's the opportunity to actually look at it
Right.
for what it is.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that piece. Like the ability to rest, to take sensory breaks, to escape overstimulation and sound, the ability to have space from demands goes away when you become a mom. And so a lot of those strategies that we've relied on to get us by are no longer enough. And a lot of times, like that co-occurs with, our children encountering different systems of care and being like, hey, what they're experiencing looks so familiar, and allowing ourselves to be curious about why that might be and keeping an open mind. So definitely seeing a lot of later diagnosed folks for sure.
I'd love to get into that overstimulation piece with you. It's something that you speak about in your work. And I'd just love to ask like what that looks like for you and how do you navigate the massive overstimulation that comes with motherhood? Because I think most of us can agree, unless your kids are little perfect angels, which mine aren't.
Who are you
Yeah,
people
I don't know. I don't know if they
who
exist.
have that experience? Yeah. I wish that I had, like, here is a list of ways to manage overstimulation. I don't. It's so hard. This piece that keeps coming up in my motherhood journey, whether that's with my own neurodivergence or my own medical stuff, is that my needs feel like they can directly conflict with the needs of my family. And a lot of times it feels it's kind of a difficult truth, incompatible with mothering. So, physically and emotionally, I have historically needed a lot of rest, a lot of recovery time. I've needed a lot of time to myself. I'm sensory avoidant. So sound is really challenging for me. And so being in an environment where there's constant screaming and, there's repetitive sounds, oof, I find for me it manifests a lot in rage. And I think that's a pretty common experience that we sort of hit this threshold and then anger kind of comes into the driver's seat. And then I may react instead of responding in a way that I want to. And I think that's come up in me a lot is like, I didn't think I would be this way as a mom. I didn't want to be this way as a mom, but I'm coming to understand that this environment isn't necessarily suitable for the needs that I have, and I'm actively in the process of figuring out what to do about that. And so again, I wish that I had a quick and easy answer, but as with all the things we're talking about, I think it's really complex. And as we talked about in the beginning, like this word of like the ecology of our home, all of our different neurotypes, all of our different experiences, all of our trauma histories are coming together in this environment. And we all have different supports that we need to manage that. And that is very much an ongoing and continual process for each member of our family right now, given that we're still a pretty young family and still discovering things about ourselves that we didn't know until like a few years ago, right?
Totally. Well, and it's so ever changing as well. Like
Mm-hmm.
as our kids grow, they change rapidly, but we also
Yeah.
change, and it's figuring out the new season. You said the word incompatible, and I find it really interesting because everything you said there, like I relate pretty deeply with all of that. Like the
Yeah.
overstimulation piece, I'm like, whoa, never felt this kind of anger ever until I became a
Exactly.
mom. Like this is not what
Yes.
I was expecting. I wanted to be a mom. I'm pretty like non-confrontational, keep it together kind of person, and all of
Right.
a sudden like I can't hang. I can't deal with this. And I think
Yep.
there's something important to be said about the expectations on moms and like what we enter
Mm.
into motherhood with. It's like, I think everybody is incompatible with that vision, right?
Yeah.
We call it the perfect mother myth, like who this ideal mom is. None of us can get there because it's a fake, not
Right.
realistic, contradictory thing.
Right.
But when you add like complexities to the
Yes.
equation, your own neurodivergence, that of your children, if they have different things that set you off, if you have trauma, you bring trauma into the motherhood experience, and there's going to be things that
Yes.
like you have no control of or very little control of your responses to certain stimuli. And
Yep.
it's hard to navigate that. It's hard to hold it all of like, there's a way I want to show up in motherhood. There's expectations of how I'm supposed to.
Right.
And there's also like the fact that I'm a human dealing with all of these
Right.
factors, and
Right.
the world's on fire and it's all overstimulating. Like, let
Absolutely.
me
It's
crawl
a
into bed and just bed rot. I
But
don't
and then
know.
that's not an option, right?
No,
Like
it's
that's
not an
literally not
option.
an option. And so like that question comes up for me all of the time. Is like, what do I do with that? What do I do with that? How do I relate to that? How do I navigate that? And as part of the like community groups that I do, there was something like really important about naming that anger and rage piece that like when I stated that, people were like, "Oh, we're allowed to say that?" Because I feel that too. I like, we had this really great conversation like, people sharing like, "I was so angry, I felt like I could punch a hole in a wall." I did punch a hole in a wall. Like I had to take time away from all of this. Like these complexities are a lot to manage, like you mentioned, particularly as our own trauma comes up in relationship to our parenthood journey, on top of this overstimulation, on top of all of these competing and conflicting needs. And let's put that in this larger frame in a society that lacks the systemic supports to adequately support mothers in general and particularly support needs moms with disabilities, moms of kids with disabilities. There are huge gaps that we fall into, and it can be incredibly isolating and challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess just to normalize so many different intense emotions can come along with that experience.
Yeah. I mean, I think normalizing it and not allowing the shame around that to be one more thing that contributes
Yes.
to just the ick of it all. There's a episode I've
Right.
recorded already, but I believe it's going to come out after this episode.
Okay.
I talked with Mackenzie Kinman. She's a therapist and parent transformation coach. We talk about emotional regulation and sometimes the shame surrounding not being able to emotionally regulate. And so for anyone
Yep.
listening to this, if this like piece of the conversation, you're like, yes, I relate to that. We are going to go into more depth in that in the conversation. But I think that piece, it's like you say the
Yeah.
society doesn't support. And that's like, I mean, that's such a huge piece to recognize. We have to recognize that. But we're also getting the message from society and from just everywhere that like this
Yeah.
is a individualized problem. If you're not able to
Right.
do it right, it's you. And it's like,
Right. Right.
take a step back, look around. Like there's no support. There's very little support. And it's in those communities, it's in the coming together and sharing it and normalizing it that it's like we can start to feel at least a little less shame
Right.
about it. It doesn't necessarily make it
Right.
easier, but
Right. So the model of therapy that I practice is called NARM, which stands for the Neuroaffective Relational Model. And there's this quote that I really like, which is that we can tend to internalize the failure of the environment as a failure of self. And that really leads to us using all kinds of things to shame ourselves. So like I did a post recently about like this grief I feel about not being the mom that I wanted to be, I use that to shame myself. Or, you know, we're having a meltdown in public and I'm doing the absolute best that I can, but I'm still running in my mind the way that other people are perceiving me. And I'm taking the hardship of my child's experience and using it to shame myself and them internally. Like they're these experiences of rage and anger that are really protest from the self saying, this is not okay. I'm not okay. I need help. I'm using that to shame myself. And so the name of my business is Resonant Healing Co., Resonant Healing Collective, because there's something that feels so important about like the resonance of our experience in other people and the healing and knowing that comes from someone else, like truly looking at you and being like, I know, like I get it. And I'm with you in that. Like I don't have the answers, but I'm here. And that's been this really important piece of my personal and professional life as I've shifted a bit out of the individual therapy space and into resourcing and supporting parents of neurodivergent kids.
I got like full body chills as you said that, because it really is so powerful to just, that's, I think about why I started this podcast when I did 3 years ago. And a huge reason was like, there was conversations I had heard, or just like an influencer posting something about being touched out and hearing them share that experience. I'm like, oh my God, that's what I've experienced. Like
Right.
people just being honest about little pieces of their experiences helped me to like just disengage with the shame I was feeling about having icky feelings about my kids, or about them
Right.
touching me or being around me, or
Right.
me exploding because
Right.
it was too loud. Um, I think that's such an important component of being a mom. And I think it's also something that's lacking in a lot of ways in the way we go about the world.
Absolutely.
There's a piece there about feeling shame even about our children. Like if there's a meltdown happening in public, and it's like hard not to. It's hard not to feel like some amount of this isn't what society expects from us. So
Right.
like get it together.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know what to like do with this. I also know you are passionate about like acceptance and just letting our kids be who they are. What does that look like in practice? Again, especially
Yeah.
in a world that pushes this conformity, pushes us to be what it expects us to be.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of parts of that. In the first piece was this important part of accepting my own neurodivergence felt relieving because when I was relating to all my symptoms and experiences, like through trauma, I was subconsciously like pushing myself in efforting towards healing. So if I can just do more work or like more therapy, and then I can make this like symptom not so in the way of my life or blah blah. And there's some truth to that, but like I've done like 10 years of therapy. I'm a therapist, and at some point like I began to be like, well, what if this is a piece of how my brain works? And instead of trying to fix it or effort towards resolution, I learn how to accommodate it. I learn how to resource myself through it. And that has been really important for me. And then an important piece of how I'm trying to parent. I use the word trying because, like, again, I'm often like losing my shit. And, but on a small level, I try to ask myself, do I have a reason to say no? And that could be like, is this hurting somebody else? Is this hurting my child? Is there some kind of whatever harm that can come from this? Yes. Okay. Important to really hold that boundary. And if not, like what is coming up in me that is contributing to me feeling like I have to shut this down? So here's like a really simple example. Like when I was trying to figure out like how to support my autistic child with hygiene, I played nail salon with him and I painted his nails, and he like let me soak them and he let me cut them without it turning into a meltdown. And I was like, oh gosh, this is a great idea. And then inside I started feeling like, oh, well, what will people think if my son is wearing pink nail polish? Is that okay? Right. And so I have to challenge those things that come up in me that might just be internalized, so many things,
All the
right? Like
things.
misogyny, like white supremacy, homophobe, like all the things that the society is baked into us, that even if we don't consciously align with those things, are still contributing to the way that we relate to our children and ourselves. So those feel like micro level things. Do I have a reason to say no? If not, what's getting in the way of allowing my child to express themselves, or me accommodating them in a way that really works from them, even if society says like that's weird or that's too different. So there's that piece. The other piece feels like advocacy. So on a like familial level with my children, we try to talk a lot about differences being a good and normal part of the human experience. So like this little phrase that we say, like I say the first part, everybody is different and that's, and then they say a good thing. And so we look at like different, like usually on Instagram or on YouTube, we look at people with limb differences and we talk about that. We practice. If you see somebody with a facial difference, if you see somebody who is talking with their hands, like how do we relate to that? Like how do we want to shape the narrative about how our kids are taking in, accepting and including people in the world? That feels like something I have some agency and control over. So we do that. And then on this larger scale, it's like, how do we work towards creating systemic and societal change that allows people to be different and to be supported in that experience? Like we have a very ableist society, right? And inclusion is a word that's, somehow become controversial, and there's initiatives to get rid of inclusion, to get rid of diversity, to get rid of equity. And it's like, my opinion, we can't be having that. So how do we find small, and if we have capacity, larger ways to contribute to making sure that schools have funding for programs like this work that I do with my mom's and parents of neurodivergent kids, literally making a space that doesn't exist that we would like to see exist. How do we keep contributing to making the world a more inclusive place? And I know there's limiting capacity when we're holding so much, but even sending an email to a representative or making a phone call once a month can hopefully take us closer to a better society
Yeah.
overall.
Yeah, there's so much in that
So much in
is
there.
helpful. I mean, I think all of that was really helpful for me to hear. You were talking about the nail salon, that sounds so cute. And it reminds me that my son asked me to paint his nails earlier this week, and I was doing something and he took the nail polish out and it's sitting on my bathroom counter. I should probably follow through on that. It's like some blue shimmery
Yes.
nail polish. He really wanted that.
Yeah.
But I just yesterday, I've been like fighting my kids on taking showers.
Yep.
And it's been just
Oh
so
yeah.
annoying and stressful. I'm like, you have to take a shower. You stink. Like, we need a shower like every other day. I'm not making my kids shower every day, but like,
Yep.
we need to like have the base of every other day. That's what I expect from you because you stink otherwise. Like, if you didn't, maybe we'd be fine. But I came up, I like, we have the potty chart and all of that for my youngest. Like, that's something we're still working on. But with my
Yeah.
oldest, I was like, you
Yeah.
know what? How about we make a chart and you can earn a prize after 10 showers I'm like, you can't fight it though. If you fight getting in the shower, you don't get the sticker on the thing. And in my mind, I'm like, this isn't the way to do this. I'm like bribing my kid to take a shower. I'm kind of shaming myself, but I'm like, what we're doing is not working. So
There's
I might
like
as well try it.
hygiene is a big challenge for us in our family. That's like where my child's like biggest like challenge is, like disability is.
Yeah.
So we have had to drastically change our expectation of what that looks like. So here's what I've landed on, because it was turning into like 2 hours of crying and screaming and meltdown. I'm like, my child lays on our vanity with his head in the sink. I wash his hair that way. It avoids getting water on his face, which is a
Yeah.
big big problem for him. And then he's 4. I basically like sponge bathe him outside the bath, and we call it an outside of the bath. And like we had to really understand like what sensory things about being sitting in the water or standing in the water was a problem for him. And to be so honest, we are like 1 to 2 times a week able to do that.
Yeah.
And for us, like where we're at right now, that is realistic, and that is something we want to keep moving forward with if possible. But we're also trying to meet him where he's at. Again, that like important to support resourcing and growth, and also accommodating the level of disability that's present. And so that's been a really steep learning curve, and something that it's easy to like internalize, like people are judging me about. I feel that a lot. But at the end of the day, I was feeling like hygiene was like traumatizing for him.
Totally.
And I didn't want it to be. So it took us a long time to figure that piece out. And, that will hopefully, evolve as he does. But right now, just again, trying not to shame myself for the accommodations that my child needs at this time, even if it's like not what society is like used to seeing or
Totally.
currently deems like okay. And I love the part about like potty training too. Like we are not potty trained, and we are like outside of what a lot of neurotypical families like their time frame is. They're like, we did the 3-day thing and it worked. I'm like, we're 2 years in and we're not there.
I'm right there with
And that's okay. And so we've moved away from like you're potty trained or you're not potty trained, and we embrace this model of like there are days when it's accessible to you, you do it. There are days where it's not accessible to you, you wear a pull-up. And we try to figure out like again, what do we need to do to support whatever level of capacity can be possible moving forward, and do our best to meet him where he's at now. But it's hard in that, again, I'll say perceived judgment. I don't know if anybody's judging me. I tell myself people are judging me, and then again use that information to shame myself. So it's great. We're doing it. It's hard.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing all of that, because I think there's such value in just hearing like what other people, it's not even, I don't even want to say it's like what other people are struggling with. It's like what other people are doing to not be struggling with it. Like
what, yeah.
It's like, this is
what are
just
people
the way
really
it
doing
works.
out there?
Yeah. And I don't think we have a lot of conversations like that. And
No.
I mean, I feel like as you're saying all of that, we have been with my youngest, just the potty training has been way different. My oldest was pretty, like he was, I think 3 when he potty trained, and it was pretty quick, but it was like, it felt later than most of the people we knew. And then my youngest, I was like, oh, it'll be quicker because he's the youngest and his older brother pees in the toilet and like all this stuff. No, it's been, I mean, he's 4.5 and we still like regularly have accidents, or just like he just decides not to do it. He just goes in his pants because he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to go to the toilet. And I think, like, as you were saying all of that, and I'm thinking this in my head, and I feel the shame come up, even though, like, it's not, first of all, it's not me. It's not something I'm doing wrong. And then also, I mean, I was an elementary school teacher. I was an elementary school teacher through COVID. I ended up leaving the profession in large part because I just felt like I couldn't be in a system that, like, had such rigid standards for people. And I remember thinking like, oh, my kindergartners that I had during COVID, oh, they're behind. Like, these standards are arbitrary. They're made up. They're different than they were when I was in kindergarten. You know, at that point it was like, I was in kindergarten 20 years ago and the standards are completely different. And I'm fine. Like,
that's a thing we ran into so much is the typical school setting wasn't working for my child. And we started looking at like, even, Montessori schools, Waldorf schools, forest schools, all the schools. And all the places that we were coming up to had potty training requirements. So I go, where do I go? Because the traditional education system is not working for me. I'm exploring alternative schooling options. The smaller class size would work for us. This more time outside works for us. Student led, that works for us. But there's potty training requirements, and they're not flexible. And there aren't I can't speak for like all of the different
Yeah.
schools, but like when I had a conversation with them, they basically said like one particular school said we can accommodate some kids with autism basically that aren't too disabled, and anything outside of that we really can't. And so this really left me as a place as a mother of like, what do I do?
Yeah.
So we ended up at a therapeutic school that we love, where we have OT and speech and PT and social work and family support, and they're fantastic. But if I wasn't a mental health professional and I didn't know that those existed and I didn't know how to find them, what would I do? And these are the kinds of things that parents are coming up to day in and day out when you have a personal experience as a parent or a child who diverges from what is considered typical, and the society and the structures in place are unable to bend and accommodate. So there's a lot of us out there asking really hard questions and shouldering a lot of responsibility and doing a lot of advocacy to try to figure out, as we talked about before, like how do we create a more inclusive world?
Yeah, it's really, I'm happy we're having this conversation and just kind of
Yeah, me
shining a light
too.
on parts of it, because I think it's important that because we all can relate to maybe not the exact things, but we can all relate to the pieces of like, this is adding so much struggle to my life, so much complexity. I'm trying to figure out, problem solve, find the school, find the resource, whatever. And it's
Right.
like to know that that's something that like just legit isn't supported. Like to kind of depersonalize that of like, this is actually a
Right.
systemic thing and not a me thing, and other people
Right.
deal with these things. It can help remove some of the shame again. Like it depersonalizes
Yeah.
that piece of it. It doesn't necessarily change the fact that like it's still a struggle
Right.
because you still don't have a solution. But
Right. I liked what you were saying too. Like, the more that we are transparent and sort of vulnerable about like what life actually looks like for us, like the emotions that we experience or these like things we're actually doing, like the, outside of the baths that we do, like it takes away some of the expectation that we use to shame ourselves. Like, oh, hey, this person that I know and respect is struggling with this. This person that I know and respect is also like 3 years into potty training and it's whatever. This person is having a really difficult time navigating the educational system. It really serves to take away that impossible expectation and create a more realistic understanding of what life is really looking like for us. So perhaps we, again, common theme, shame ourselves less about being humans with disabilities, being humans with complexity in a
yeah,
world that's very black and white
yeah.
and rigid.
As we wrap up, I do want to kind of zoom out and look at the world we're currently living in, because I think having a conversation like this, I don't know how to not acknowledge it. There's a lot
Right.
of rhetoric out there right now, particularly surrounding, I can't believe we're still having this conversation, but like the cause of autism, like unsubstantiated claims about Tylenol and pregnancy causing autism, vaccines, all these things, right? And it's hard to watch because obviously, like, it's like we're still having these conversations, really. But I
Right.
also think it's important to acknowledge like the impact that these narratives have on moms who are trying to do the best for their families and who are dealing with this, and
Right.
maybe the additional guilt that comes along with it or questioning of self. What harm do you see this kind of rhetoric causing for neurodivergent families in particular?
I feel like this is a whole
I
podcast,
know.
but I'll
Throw it
try
on
to
you at the end,
distill it
right?
down. Yes, always like that last few minutes of a therapy session is like, oh, and I've never told anybody this, but it's kind of like that. So I am not the expert on this, and I encourage folks to do their own research. But some of the things that I see is that this rhetoric hurts everybody,
Mm-hmm.
not just families of neurodivergent people. When we stigmatize vaccines, we contribute to having a less safe world for our children, for immunocompromised people, for everyone. When we have rhetoric that says our worth is tied to how productive we can be. What does that mean for people who have high support needs, who may not be able to work, who will be dependent on other people for the rest of their lives? What does that say to them about their worth and their place in this society, right? Like, when we say Tylenol causes autism, what does that do for women like me who have chronic health issues that experience a tremendous amount of pain in pregnancy and are having to talk themselves out of relief, minuscule relief, because we're afraid we're going to mess up our kid for the rest of their life? Also helps us like examine, why are we so afraid of our children being autistic? Like, what is that even about in general? There are hardships, yes, but there is also so much beauty, and those things can truly coexist. I think there's so many different pieces of this when we think about like pouring funding into research that's already been done, causes that have already been identified, and replacing that with like misinformation, when we could be pouring this funding into research that helps fill in the gaps that all of us are struggling with as families who have a huge lack of support. Where are the community resources? Where are the professionals who are trained to look for the nuances of neurodivergence, like pediatricians, beyond what a stereotypical presentation of autism is? There's a lot of talk about pathological demand avoidance, but we really don't have a good understanding of that. Why don't we pour research into that so we can understand more about this and create supports and interventions that are actually beneficial? Why don't we listen to the autistic community about the research that they've already done, the ideas that they have, the families who are already struggling, and look to them to figure out what we should be investing in and what we're needing? There's so much distraction from the heart of the issue, and so much time and resources being poured into shaming families for being neurodivergent, for struggling. And keeping in the theme of this podcast, it becomes very easy for us then to internalize the failure of the environment as a failure of self, and to stay isolated and to hide what we're experiencing, to feel horrible when our child's having a meltdown, when our child isn't meeting typical milestones. Like, there's so much harm. And I know that, we don't have a lot of time, but I just want to leave people with this idea that it is okay to grieve your experience. It is okay to have big emotions. It is okay to not be regulated all the time. It is okay to do things differently. It is okay to accommodate. It is okay to find joy in your new reality. It is okay to struggle to find joy in your reality. Like, all of these things are okay. And as a society, if we can move towards like increasing our own capacity for complexity, to be with each other in our humanness, in our complexity, our differences, our needs, that really feels like the way forward for me, in my personal opinion. So again, it's hard when we're under-resourced as people, as families, as communities, as a society, and we're still having to pour that energy into advocacy and fighting for equity and support and inclusion. But we will. And we would love it if you all joined us.
I mean, obviously, there's like so much to unpack
So
there.
many things.
I just want to point out restate again what you said about taking the systemic failures, the systemic issues, and making those personal and how that can happen. I think that's a really important thing. Anyone listening to this, taking that away, whether it's with this narrative that's out there, this rhetoric that's out there, or not. And I want to tie that into also just thinking about like redefining expectations. We talk so much about that on this podcast for moms. There's these impossible standards that are set for us if we don't take time to actually like sit with what's important, what actually matters to us, instead of like just automatically holding ourselves to these standards that exist. I think that goes for us in motherhood, but it also goes for every other part of life and what we think about our children and navigating the world. Like, if we can be intentional about thinking about what our expectations actually are, what they're based in, it can do a lot to just break down the quickness to shame that we may feel when things are different.
Absolutely. And hopefully, like, we talked a lot about, us shaming ourselves, but we also have a tendency to shame others. And so could there be more compassion and more understanding, you know, as a neurotypical mom passes a neurodivergent mom and child experiencing something really challenging at the zoo? The dialogue that you have with your family after you walk by, like, yeah, the ability to move out of shame and towards these more compassionate ways of being, hopefully, is where we're going in these communities that we're creating in our greater society.
Yeah, and having these conversations is like a key
Yeah.
part of it.
Yeah.
So, the way that I like to end these episodes is asking a question about caring for ourselves and just like, how do you care for yourselves in the mass complexities of life and motherhood? And just if you have any advice for moms to make sure that they are also caring for themselves regularly, consistently while doing it all.
Yeah. I think, again, it's going to be dependent on each person. And when our capacity is low, it can be really hard to take care of ourselves when we have disabled children whose needs are conflicting. It can be very hard to take care of ourselves. So, I guess two things. One is this process that we've talked about so much today, which is having agency inside of ourselves around how we choose to relate to what we're experiencing, what our children are experiencing, what we're feeling, being mindful of that sort of default programming that comes online and seeing if we can invite curiosity towards that. I talk a lot with my clients about like the tone of our thoughts being like, why did I just do that? Versus like, why did I just do that? Like, why did I just do that? What's going on there? This tone shift of just inviting curiosity so that even if the world is on fire, a lot of times our personal life is on fire. There's not a lot of space for ourselves. We have the ability to make this space inside ourselves in the way that we relate to our internal experience and our child's internal experience. So that would be one piece. And then also inviting a shift towards community care because, again, there's only so much that we can do to support ourselves and our kids. And I know that we are all doing the most. Like, we are trying so hard. And there's something to be said about allowing that to come back to a community space and even being in a room of other moms like me who also have no capacity in our burnout, but we're seeing each other and we're being real with each other. Like, that has been so important. So, yeah, self-care, yes, and also community care feels really important.
I love all of that. I think that's so in line with the rest of this conversation and just important to keep in mind, like, together it can make a difference coming together and
Yeah,
sharing in those experiences.
absolutely.
Amanda, where can listeners find you? Is there anything they should keep an eye out for?
I think the best place to connect with me is on Instagram. And then I'm also doing a free virtual book club where other moms of neurodivergent kids can get together and learn and discuss things, which has been really cool. And putting together a directory and resource guide for parents who find themselves navigating these things and needing some guidance in the process. 2026, I'm hoping to do a retreat for moms of neurodivergent kids. It's in the idea phase, but if anybody's out there that's like, that sounds really cool and I want to contribute to that vision, let me know. Love to talk to you and make it happen.
I love that. I think that could be a really powerful just coming together. And again, the beauty in that, the power in that,
Yeah.
just share our experiences and have a little bit of a reprieve.
Yes. 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 A little bit of time and space away
Yes,
sometimes is a
intentionally.
good thing. Yes.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing so vulnerably. I mean, there's so much from this that I am going to take away and just hold on to. And I think for anyone listening, there's probably pieces in here that, again, it just helps to like shine the light on what's really happening in our different lives and acknowledge
Yeah.
that like we're all doing this, we're all doing the best we can. It looks different in each of our homes. And there's nothing wrong with that, even if it
Right.
feels like it sometimes, because we're trained to believe there is.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and I look forward to connecting with you and your listeners moving forward if there's a need.
Yeah. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will be back next week for another episode. Make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss out on that. You are worthy, Mama.